What's happening? Andy here. I am joined today by Steve Rolla of Pros Elite Group. How are you today, Steve?
Hey, Andy. How are you? It's great to see you again.
I am awesome. Good to see you. Good to see you. You are in Connecticut today. You are getting ready for the big jump once the weather turns down to Florida. Yes?
Yeah. I like to describe myself, Andy, as a weather coward. If I see frost on the lawn in Connecticut in October, I assume it's a blizzard and I head to Florida. Meanwhile, in June, if there's a rainstorm with wind in it, I assume it's a hurricane. I bully on back to Connecticut. So, we're getting ready to go back to Florida.
It's definitely cooling off up here in Western New York, so I don't blame you. Before we jump in, let's give the 30,000-foot overview. Who are the Pros Elite Group?
Okay, so the Pros Elite Group is a group of executives that got together back in 2009 for the purposes of teaching people how to execute to the industry benchmarking model. Along the way, my partners Jerry and Jeff started that with a service consulting business. From there, they brought me in to do the whole other piece, which is overall dealership operations, the sales management piece, mergers and acquisitions, et cetera. About 6 years ago, we started developing an automated process to do what we do, and we captured that in a tool we call Pivot. And Pivot is the tool that is just absolutely exploded for us. It is an automated process that manages a service, a sales, and even the back office operations of a company, and teaches and operates the execution skills that are attendant with that. So we've got a lot of great things going. And one of the things that I wanted to chat with you about today is my partners, Jerry and Jeff, just finished doing back-to-back service management trainings, and they're making me feel guilty. So I'm going to do a sales management training program that I want to talk to you about and give everybody plenty of notice to get their folks in. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that when we get
Very
going.
nice. Very nice. So Jerry Newberry, Jeff Kelly, that was just what was last week down in Tampa, right? It was it Tampa? It was down in Tampa. It was service managers. There were some very big dealers. Some dealers don't want us to share their names. They're at that level, but you guys always fill the house. You had a ton of people there. I attended that one year, and it's pretty amazing. It's very in depth. But so those guys typically are the service piece of this, and now you're going to do another session, and this session is going to be in November, and this one's going to be more sales based. So you typically handle the sales side, you split it down the middle, but this Pivot software, this platform that you have, and we'll talk a little bit further once we discuss your upcoming session. I'd like to get into Pivot a little bit more, because that software, when I saw earlier this year, you had an event that I attended as well, and you guys gave some really nice overviews of it. It's just, whether you're on the service side, whether you're on the sales side, it's just very, very cool. So we'll talk about that as we wrap up. But you are you're doing what you guys call NexGen Advanced Sales Management Training. It's November 3rd and 4th. It's going to be in Greensboro, North Carolina. We're going to have information below this post so people can sign up about it. But tell us about it. It's a two-day session. Who comes to this? What's it about? What do you cover?
Great. So as you said, it's a 2-day session. It's our training, whether it be on the service or on the sales side. I think the most important part that I would emphasize, if I only had one sentence to go about it, is it's what are the words training? What are the words that I say to somebody in any situation that make people want to do what they've been trained to do in any environment, whether it's, again, service and or sales? I want to mention that one of the things that we did as we rolled out this newest version of it is we went out and secured a new partner for Steve to work with in the execution of this training. So a gentleman who used to work with me in the last company that I had the blessing to run has joined me in this sales management training effort. His name is Kevin Hoverman, and Kevin is a younger version of me by a lot. Kevin brings to this training a lot of the new skills that, quite candidly, have perhaps not sailed into my harbor quite yet. Kevin's an expert in those, and I'll talk a little bit about those skills. And
I met Kevin at your show earlier this year.
That is correct. So Kevin's a wonderful young man with a lot of energy, and he fits perfectly into what we want to do. So our training is not conceptual. There's no theory in what we do. As I said, what we specialize in is what are the words training. Whether it's an imaging environment or a managed network services environment, tell me what I should say. Tell me what are those things that I should measure, and what are those things that I need to be good at coaching. So we talk about how to use the new management technologies in our training. Again, whether it's sourcing and recruiting, we're going to teach you how to use a special emphasis, or we're going to have a special emphasis in that area by using social or online tactics. And that's where Kevin has it all over me in that presentation. I mean, Kevin is a social media expert, a social marketing expert, and he talks about using the online tactics. I know that when we finish with this kind of a training program, we'll hear back from the past recipients of the training how suddenly what appeared to be an impossible task of attracting and recruiting sales professionals has somehow got easier because they're using some of the tactics that they've learned from Kevin on how to get through to somebody on Facebook, or how to get through to somebody on Twitter, or how to even identify those people who are in the market and looking for some kind of new opportunity to take themselves into. Kevin's an expert at doing that.
So we did a lot of research. We did tons of research in the past when my dad ran this company before we kind of shifted to this media role. But that was always the biggest issue. And that was before COVID and before, the job market really tied up. This was, years ago. This was still the biggest issue. Every single year we did this study, hiring, recruiting, finding good people. So do you spend a lot of time on this? Is this, obviously you're bringing Kevin on, he's got a lot more, a lot more he's bringing to the table with the social media approach that you mentioned, and obviously recruiting, looking through LinkedIn, but do you spend a lot of time on this? Because this is such a huge part of, I think, of, what the dealers are really struggling with right now, both sides of the house, actually, on sales and service.
And I'll say we spend 2 to 3 hours on that section alone.
Wow.
Because Kevin's taking them through. It's one thing to know that the vehicle is there, whether that be Facebook, whether that be LinkedIn, whether that be Twitter, whatever it may be. It's another thing to know, how do you conduct that interview? How do you get some excitement? How do you draw those people to come to you? What is that your profile's got to look like on those vehicles in order to attract those people to come to you? And when you get them, how is it that you interview them? And what are the things that you do to profile your company to make it look like the kind of company that these people want to work with? Again, this is one of those things that Kevin has dedicated himself to over the past 3 or 4 years, becoming an expert to. And it was one of the things that when I was making that choice to select somebody to partner with me, one of the things that I knew that I didn't feel a gap in, and then I looked for intensely, and he just does an exceptional job with that.
Perfect. Well, what about, the sales rep, right? I mean, I'm going to guess a decent amount of this is going to be, the management of that sales rep in different environments for different parts of their day, for, I would think their 30, 60, 90, their outlook, their day to day, their, how do they manage their day? How do they manage a database? How do you, how much time do you spend on that? And what kinds of things do you discuss in that area?
Great question. So our initial forays in this, going back almost 7 years ago when we first started this, it's hard to believe in the 7 years that we've been doing this now, we've trained over 600 sales managers.
Wow.
We've done it quietly behind the scenes, but we've trained over 700 sales managers. And in our initial ventures, we concentrated a lot on the sales management processes, as I like to call it. First, let's talk about the metrics that we think are important. And then let's talk about what the measurements are inside of those metrics that really speak to results and not necessarily to strategies. Let's talk about results and tactics to achieve them. As that process has matured, we now know that, or we think we've educated the industry into what are those measurements, what are those critical metrics that we look at, such as generating net new move forward appointments, and or number of prospects that are in that pipeline that exists in that 0 to 90 day process that are closable and have had those network steps taken to get them to that closing process. So we focus now to taking that sales management process and conducting very highly productive plan and reviews and one-on-ones that speak to a joint effort on the part of the manager and the rep to achieving whatever those goals are inside of that metric-driven process, that sales management process that we build. And when we get inside of that, you talk about what kind of time do you spend on that? We will spend together in that session probably 4 hours, just conducting that highly effective plan and review based on the kinds of activities and the kind of metrics, the kind of move forward appointments that we need to have in order to generate the kind of business we want to have.
So you're known for using these metrics, especially in the service area where Prosely really got their start. But looking at the day-to-day, right? The data that, a typical dealer would have in front of them, especially in the sale, particularly in the sales side of it. How are you guys positioning? How are you helping these dealers look at their data and figure things out. Territory management, the size of the territories, how many reps to put in it, how to set up their dealership. How are you helping them use their data? You know, do you go through it? Is it part of this pivot platform? Tell me about that.
I think we'll reverse the role because you just answered my question for me, but I'm going to take you down the path of how you got to the answer because you did a great job with it.
Thank you.
In our old metric-driven sales management training programs, we're using sales management process technology that went back to the mid-2009, 2010 period when we're talking about number of devices that equal a sales rep's territory, perhaps the number of opportunities that existed, the Becky, the NOPA, whatever it is you wanted to use. You know, we talked about those things. And then we built Pivot. And what we found is that those things that were taught to me, those things that were taught by other people, to what is the size of a sales territory, what is the size of the market opportunity, they weren't even close to right. We now have a process-driven automated tool that we teach inside of the sales management training that shows that you need to take a look at the market mix of what a sales rep space is, and the number of units can be all over the place that will generate a workload. We've seen some territories that have 500 and 600 installed units in a sales rep's territory that won't generate $30,000 a month in upgrade business. And we've seen other territories that have 200 units in it that will generate $40,000 a month. So it's not number of units, that's gone. And then when we overlaid that with what's the opportunity in a zip code, what's the opportunity inside of a county, what's the opportunity inside of what's known as a CBSA, a core business strategic area, when you look at those areas, suddenly you realize, holy smokes, there are massive areas inside of a sales rep's territory that aren't being covered, that we have 2% penetration in, where we exist in a company that has 12% in general market share penetration. So we're showing sales managers how to use this automated tool.
How often do you find that the sales managers, that the dealers are actually revisiting their territories and right sizing them? Is this something they do often, or maybe your customers do, the people in your classes probably do, but in general, you know, you talk to a ton of dealers. Is this something they look at on a regular basis, or what do you think?
So I'm going to hide behind attorney-client privilege like you just did a few moments ago when you're talking about larger dealers who don't want you to know that they were at the training. So I'm going to suggest to you that I have 2 or 3 of the largest dealers in the United States using Pivot.
Yeah.
And there's a good reason they're 2 or 3 of the largest dealers in the United States, because they've now sunk their teeth into our territory design tool. And I have the vice presidents and general managers and sales executives working with me on a daily basis to balance their territories. They're so fascinated with how quick this tool will work for them and how quick this will identify for them. You know, Andy, one of the tenets of Pivot that has lit up just the universe of excitement with sales is that when we do our first merger of information that exists in a dealership, what's in their ERP versus what's in their CRM, and we say to the 2 devices, please talk to each other and tell us who's assigned to every device in this company, we find out that most dealerships have 5 to 15% of their base unassigned, completely and utterly unassigned. And I think that's like dawn over Marblehead for most dealer executives when they see that. It's like, how could that happen? It's so explainable. We lose a sales rep.
And you're not telling them what CRM to use, right? You're helping them get more out of whatever they happen to be using. So, I mean, there's a ton of good ones out there. If it's Sales Chain, Salesforce, whatever they might be using, right?
Absolutely.
But you're going to help them make that more efficient.
That is correct. And it's never is it the CRM's fault, nor is it the ERP fault, or worse yet, is it the sales manager's fault? Everybody's trying to do their job. But what we do is we have stuff that falls through the crack. Sales rep leaves, or we just decide to change the territory, and we have equipment that falls through the cracks. That first download we do with Pivot is probably correcting sins that have existed and have grown over the past 15 years, Andy. It's amazing to me when I see the number of unassigned accounts. And for these 3 very large dealers that I'm working with in the United States, this has been exciting for them, because when you get to $150, $250 million in size, and you're staying within a certain market confine, it becomes a little bit harder to grow your business if you're not careful. You're doing a great job of soliciting that new business, but the barn door is open in the back and the cattle are getting out the back door. I found a way to keep the base, get the base reassigned in the way that we want it. And then from that day forward, we've got that problem pushed behind us. That alone justifies any expense that we charge for pivot. I always used to tell people that if you can't see what we do generating one segment 3 copier extra a month and have it cost whatever in half the GP, a quarter of the GP, don't do us. No, you shouldn't do business with us. On the other hand, take a look at this module of pivot alone. Take a look at what I can pick out of your unidentified base, and then sit back in your chair like I used to and say, how could it be possible that I just got a call from a customer telling me that they haven't seen one of my sales reps in over 3 years? And the answer is, I had a dot on that map that was unassigned through no one's fault, and it just sat there with nobody trying, no tool to identify it. I've got that tool.
But again, when you don't update your territories, and you know, a few complexes go up, customers move here and there, and the market just shifts, right? And to have a tool where you can just pop in the zip code and see what the market opportunity is, right, for your sales reps, and maybe shift a sales rep who's in what you thought was a good territory, but they're struggling, and it turns out it's not as good as it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And maybe you reconstruct your territory lines. It happens at a lot of companies, and in our industry, I don't think it happens very often. I think we get into a pattern, right, where, you know, it's sort of been like this for a while, and we know our market, but you know, as things shift, if you don't take a look at that every now and then, you're going to leave a lot of food on that table. So I guess wrapping up, what else do we have in this? We've got some time management. I'm looking at the list. Database, we kind of talked about. Managed print, and the other one I think is kind of neat that you do cover on according to the list, managed services, right? So
before I close out, that one's a big one, because we've got some cool stuff on that. We've got, as you know, our Pros Elite 100 dealer base is filled with some pretty important and strong dealers.
Yes, sir.
And from them, we have learned a lot about being successful in managed network services. So we took what we've learned and what we understand now to be the initial benchmarks for this industry, and we now have a module on managed network services that deals with an important fundamental, like addressing who is your target customer profile, that TCP, and how, more importantly, do I adhere to that? And what's the importance of it? What are the tactics I use to do that? Or simplifying your technology stack. We have a module in there that talks to that. Or one of the better ones, there's strategy involved in deciding whether to have your own internal network operations center or to outsource that. And when do you do that? And when I'm building a network services transaction, how do I decide where that transaction is going to go from there? We also have compensation practices now. You know, whether you have a sales professional who's a dedicated managed network services person, or you're approaching it from a hybrid perspective, utilizing some of your better imaging systems, sales reps to do it, we've got compensation practices that'll nail that down. So we've got an incredible package. It even speaks to the benchmarks for productivity from all of the support characters that are inside of that managed network services transaction. We think we've got probably the first and most productive piece on managed network services to offer our industry. So we're excited about having that piece in there. It's about a 2-hour session. We think we've got it nailed down. So that's what we've got in a nutshell. I could go on, as you know me. I could talk.
Well, it sounds like an amazing couple of days of training, right? So you had a great quote in there. I'm gonna put it out there. Every president needs to attend this training with their sales managers. That was from Bruce Gibbs of GFI Digital, very popular president in this industry. So November 3rd and 4th, the registration ends October 15th. We're gonna put something on a link in this description below so that people can come and register. How many people do you think will be at this event? What's the goal?
This is we typically restrain it to 20 people. We like the fact that Kevin and I can break them into groups where they work with each other, and then we can still be a part of those groups. We found that when it gets over 20 people, we start to have that group become a little bit disconnected. So we found the optimal number somewhere between 50 and 20, and that's where we'll cut it down to.
Well, I can say just based on, you know, the service one that I attended, that it's amazing watching. Like, these guys were filling up notebooks. Like they were writing and writing. This wasn't just sit in the back and kind of sit on your phone for a couple of days so that you can get a trip somewhere. This is 2 solid days of really, really good information. We'll put the information about the classes in there. We'll put the links so that people can register. If you want to go, do it quick because there's only 20 spots.
Yeah, we already have 9 people registered. So
do it quick, people. Do it quick.
If you're going to think about doing it, if you want to know anything more about it, people can get in contact with me. They can give me a call. They can just go to our website and find out more. But by all means, if we're going to do it, this will be the last one we do for the year.
Yeah, and you're gonna be in a room with some heavy hitters, some big peers that you're gonna have a relationship with after these 2 days. This is a grueling, very, very intense couple of days. And, maybe I'll pop in and see how it's going. But you guys have a good time down there. Thanks for sharing this with me, Steve.
It would be great seeing you. All right. Thank you, Andy.
Take care. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.